And speaking of the inconsistencies, let's hear from Patrick Dumont himself as he calls this Luka trade a long-term move.
So tough decisions are never easy. And part of leadership is looking at risk and looking at all the factors of a decision and being willing to act at that time and look to the long term and not only think about the short term or how it may be received immediately, but to think about the long-term benefits and what it may allow you to achieve if given all the right considerations. And I think for us, going into the trade deadline last year, we were not competitive. If you recall, we were not a playoff-bound team. And we were able to do some things to reconstruct the roster and enable the team to become very competitive. And after the trade deadline last year, we actually had the best record in basketball, which was a big accomplishment. And we got to the championship games, and we didn't win. And so we had to decide, how do we get better? What can we do to improve our team? And so we looked at our trajectory during the season and realized that we did not get better. But the teams that we competed against, some of which we beat, did get better. And ultimately, when you look at the Eastern Conference, after we were to get through the Western Conference, if we're so fortunate, you would have to beat some very formidable teams, including one that we lost to, which actually got better. So this was a decision about the future. If you look at our roster today and who we have, we feel like we position ourselves to be incredibly competitive against the best teams in the NBA. And if you're a fan of basketball, I'll just throw that out there, you have Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, Anthony Davis, and either Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively as your starting five. That's going to put fear into a lot of teams in the league if we can get going.
Boy, that's a tough sell right there. And also him calling the moves a long-term move after Nico Harrison said, hey, they're trying to win now. So again, a lot of inconsistencies of what's really being said. And Dumont, you really can't sell that starting lineup to a fan base when they had the best player 25 and younger in the whole NBA. But hold on right there. There's some more inconsistencies. Knowing that there's a new CBA and it punishes teams who spend a lot of money, check out what Patrick Dumont had to say about having max players outside of Luka on the Mavericks.
The other thing that people say is, salary cap. I have to tell you something. It was not about the contract. The way the NBA works, there's a salary cap, and it's just a percentage of the cap. So if I could sign 3 max players, I'd do it. It's just a percentage of risk allocation within the team's overall cost structure. So I don't know if anyone from the team hears me, but if you can find us 3 max players, let's go.
Tomorrow.
Let's go.
It's kind of crazy in today's landscape. There's a lot of media covering the NBA, but notice right there, there's no pushback, which there should have been right away. So sometimes owners and players get to skate around certain questions and avoid certain accountabilities. But right here, Tim McMenamin also brings up the reality of the expenses of owning an NBA contending team today. The finances in this Luka story is definitely a major factor into how this thing overall played out.
And I've asked Cuban recently, I said, do you regret selling? And he said, sometimes. Then I check my bank account. So I think we get to the real reason that he sold. I mean, the man cashed out at almost 10 times what he paid, just a huge, massive profit. And the simple fact, and Cuban has admitted this, he calls himself a middle-class billionaire, which I think you should accompany that line with some violin music. But his point is a middle-class billionaire can't fund an NBA contender as expensive as they've gotten out.
And also, NBA owners can't afford to maintain contending teams when they previously have shown that they've struggled in order to put together that contending team. That's another thing that has gotten overlooked. Just look at the saga the Mavericks have been in. They lost Jalen Brunson. They had to go after Kyrie. And then they had to reconfigure the team by getting rid of certain guys and adding Daniel Gafford, adding PJ Washington. So it was already a roller coaster ride. Because remember, they tanked the season before they got Derek Lively. So they kind of struggled to put pieces together around Luka. And teams that don't have the right front offices to put together teams with an already big-time superstar being on the roster, that is really going to cost you big time in today's NBA, especially with the way the CBA is constructed.
Mavericks, from the time they broke up that 2011 championship team, when Cuban was the guy who read the CBA and challenged everybody who questioned the moves whether you had, they hadn't paid luxury tax up until this year. And, you know, Cuban, who very proudly for a long time would spend whatever, was counting pennies. And, you know, that's part of what went down with the whole Jalen Brunson negotiations. The luxury tax was looming there. And so I really think this was a chance for Cuban to cash out. And, you know, I think he hoped that he would keep basketball operations, even though that was never realistic. But it was a chance to cash out, and it was an acknowledgement that he didn't have the funds to financially support an NBA contender, especially as Luka was about to be on a Supermax deal.
And the green light kind of went off in Patrick Dumont's head when he seen the backlash that the organization had received after trading Luka. But Tim McMahon speaks on the cost around giving a player the Supermax contract. It's not necessarily the contract itself that's expensive. Is maintaining a complete and competitive team around Luka is what really was the hurdle for the Mavs to jump over, especially with them not necessarily even being good at formulating a team around Luka to begin with.
And here's the thing. It wasn't the fear of Luka not signing the Supermax. It was the fear of being committed to Luka on a Supermax contract that played a role in the Mavericks making this trade. The Mavericks thought Luka would be a bad investment on a Supermax contract. That's an awfully risky take to have in terms of how it's going to age, but that's exactly what they felt. They weren't scared of him not signing it. They were scared of him signing it and then being committed to him.
And just taking a step back and just trying to understand exactly what Tim McMahon just said right there, because every single season with Luka being on that Supermax and just having to renew Kyrie, perhaps get a couple role players that are kind of at the mid-level, every season the Mavericks could be looking at $70 to $110 million in luxury tax. And the longer teams now stay in that luxury tax, you get penalized on your draft picks in the future. And you also now get limited on what kind of trades you can make. No more 2-for-1s. You can't make any trades where the numbers don't exactly match up to the T. The Mavericks would now become exactly what had happened to the Phoenix Suns, where you're fishing every season in the minimum player market because you just have too many guys on salary. Booker, Durant, and Beal just eating up so much of that cap that not only you're shelling out over $100 million every season in luxury tax, but you actually can't improve the team. And if you want to re-sign a player who happened to break out, let's say a role player like Grayson Allen, they ended up paying him double his salary because they have to shell out additional money for luxury tax. So Patrick Dumont and his family would try to justify why they just spent $3.5 billion on a team when every season the team is operating in a negative, where they're paying out luxury tax and they're getting worse and worse and worse as the years go by, and their future first-round draft picks are being automatically pushed to the back of the line. So make no mistake about it, this is going to be a conundrum for a number of teams when their young players hit their 7th to 10th NBA season. Any top-performing player out of the lottery in that 7th and 10th year is eligible for 35% of the team's salary cap. You got SGA, Ja Morant, Paolo Banchero. A lot of small market teams are going to have to face this reality, while at the same time them losing that additional revenue from their local TV markets. The Phoenix Suns, even though when they had Kevin Durant and Booker and Beal, they were available over the antenna for free. Other teams had to collaborate with baseball teams and NHL teams in order to create an app or create an additional package for their fans to try to tune into their games. So it's like a lot of different storms combining all at once to kind of create this type of atmosphere. But hey, this is an environment that the owners and the players had voted for, and Luka, being a top homegrown talent of his team, is not going to be the only superstar that's going to be surprisingly traded under these new CBA rules. There's going to be other teams that's going to struggle to put a contender around their young star. And eventually, after the 7th or 10th season, when them contracts start coming up, those extra super maxes where it starts to look like 80 mil a year, 70 mil a year, even 90 to 100, because that's where it's going up to. These teams are going to begin to ship their stars away, not necessarily because they want to, it's because the costs are just way too high. And some of these franchises may not want to admit, but they don't have necessarily the front office personnel to put a contending team year in, year out around their superstars. See, it's not just picking up a couple of players or just plucking a couple of guys off of free agency. It's going to be a nice little sweet spot. It's going to be a nice little combination of just managing the numbers as far as the contract years and when they come off the books versus adding additional players into that whole mix. It's almost as if now teams actually have to be equally as good as managing the money and also acquiring new talent that actually fits. There's now a very thin line between competing for a championship and starting over. So this is the landscape going forward, and the NBA owners as well as the players agreed on this type of dynamic. Luka will not be the only superstar reaching his 7th to 10th season on the team that he got drafted on, surprisingly getting traded.